Allison McCabe took the stand. Her parents are Matt and Jen McCabe. She was in high school at the time of the incident. That night, she was driving around with friends, and she said, I ended up having to drive Colin home. And even though she's smiling at the prosecutor and she's pleasant, you can see by her breathing rate that she's stressed. She said Colin texted asking for a ride, and she went and got him. The prosecutor said he was drinking. Is that why he needed a ride? And she said yes. Oh, really? So where was his car then? I think this is a way of the prosecutor trying to present people in a certain light. He said this before. All these people are drinking for hours and driving around, and here he's saying, oh, Colin was choosing to get a ride, making a good choice because he doesn't want to drink and drive. What's the drinking age there? He's 17. If the age of majority is older than 17, then Colin is breaking the law by drinking, but he's being presented as making a good choice here. Allison, or Allie, has Life 360. Well, that means there's data. She says she was at her friend's house when she got the text. She guesses it was around midnight. They used Snapchat as well. She said she parked in the driveway on the left side. How does everybody park in the driveway on the left side? She said it was a few minutes before Colin came out. Well, Nicole says that she bumped into Colin in the foyer as he was leaving. But Nicole didn't see Allie outside. Nobody saw Allie outside waiting. They would have recognized her. The judge interrupts here and they go to lunch. Allie had an iPhone. She texted Colin that she was there and he responded, okay, and came out to the car. And they showed the text. It says 12:10 here. Well, that's not possible. It was established through Chris Albert's cross-examination that Colin couldn't have arrived home at the time that everybody testified to, that it was much later. And there's another problem with this screenshot of this text. It didn't come from the police. It didn't come from a data extraction. It came from her. And there's a rule of best evidence that keeps getting violated. You want the original. You want evidence that you can be confident has not or could not have been altered in any way. I'm also recalling at this time that Jen McCabe had asked another witness to send her a copy of a screenshot from her phone. Then they posted photos. Ostensibly, these photos were taken on February 11th at the Alberts' home. And I think the point to these photos is to show that Colin didn't have any injuries on him. And that's what the prosecution does. He points out the lack of obvious injuries. I got 3 things to say about that. First of all, we don't know when these photos were taken. Second, the lack of obvious injuries just means that no one hurt Colin. If he'd had minor injuries, they may not show up in the picture. And this is February 11th, if that's correct. So even if that's correct, if he had minor injuries, they'd have healed up by then. I'm having an issue with the utter disregard of best practices. Sometimes you try and get a document or you try and get a piece of evidence and you can't get the original or it's not perfect. And it can still be acceptable, or you have the jury decide how much weight to attach. And you consider factors that could have intervened to cause any kind of contamination or manipulation of the evidence. But it's just weird that it was not presented by police. I mean, we're not talking about a shoplifting investigation here. Also note in this photo, the second photo, Colin's holding a red Solo cup. Yes, I know lots of people have them. Just an observation. On cross-examination, Allison says she and Colin were very close. That text conversation that they're putting up on the screen is not an extraction. It's a screenshot that Allison took. She never turned that screenshot over to police. She said she was never asked. All of 2022, nobody asked for that screenshot. He asked, "Why didn't you hand it over?" And she said, "Nobody asked." And she added, "It wasn't relevant." Then why take the screenshot if you think it's not relevant? And if you were never asked, again, why take the screenshot? She turned over the screenshot in the summer of 2023. But guess what? She had switched phones by then. And she said she transferred data from the old phone to the new. And she doesn't remember when she took the screenshot and whether or not it was after she got her new phone. And she didn't get that new phone until December 2022. And remember, Brian Jr. works in IT, so he knows this stuff. And kids know how to work these things. And this also makes me think back to Brian Albert's phone and him also getting a new phone. The prosecution asked, well, did you get rid of the phone or did you upgrade? He's parsing words here to frame it in a certain way. Nobody asked her for her phone. No law enforcement got that phone or even looked at that phone. It wasn't until August 2023 that she even revealed the text exchange. Prior to the August 2023 proceeding, she was never interviewed by law enforcement. When she was interviewed, it was via Zoom, and Jen McCabe was in the house with Allie at the time she was interviewed via Zoom. And the witness says she doesn't recall whether or not her mother, Jen McCabe, was monitoring that interview. How can she not recall that? And I'm going to say something here about this young witness. She's a senior in high school. The family's very close. She lives with her parents. At her age, the brain is not fully developed. And the adults in a child's life or a young person's life, regardless of how independent the young person thinks they are, adults still have a lot of power and control and can easily convince or manipulate that younger person. And the defense went through, on your iPhone, you have options. If you click the trash can, the thing can get deleted. She says there are no deleted messages from the conversation in which the photos were sent. And the defense says, but nobody would know, right? If you deleted them. And that's true. And the point is, nobody can really know when those pictures were taken. All of these things are easily manipulated. And once again, this points to the need to adhere to principles of best evidence. If the Alberts and the McCabes are all telling the truth, then a proper investigation would have spared them all of this suspicion. The defense puts up the text and says, so this message in blue means that both parties had an iPhone. And she says, yes. I mention this because it might be important. It was pointed out that you can change the time on your iPhone and no one would know that was done. She was asked if the police looked through her new phone and she said no. They never physically looked at her phone. They were not even shown the phone. In the Zoom interview, she stated she believed she dropped Colin off at 12:15 or 12:30. Well, where's the recording of this Zoom interview? They're really easy to record. Maybe the defense does have it. Well, dropping Colin off at home at 12:15 to 12:30 cannot be true. Refer back to Chris Albert's cross-examination. There is no way this can be true. She says she stayed home the rest of the night. She said she thinks she got home around 12:30-ish, and the defense pulls out information from her Life 360. On January 29th at 12:04, her Life 360 shows her close to home. At 12:06, she left. At 12:23 a.m., she completed a 7-mile drive, left home again at 12:23, and the defense suggests that she drove through that home bubble. At 12:26, she left home again or drove through that home bubble. And she says she doesn't remember that. At 12:26, she completed a 1-mile drive. At 12:26, left Canton High School, arrived home at 12:29. So when you're hearing 1226, she did this, and 1226 again, that she left Canton High School, we're talking about bubbles. So it doesn't mean that she stopped at home and went in the house and sat down. It can mean that she just drove through that home bubble area. At 12:31 a.m., she drove 12 miles, and she denies this. At 1:08 a.m., she left home again, and she denies this. At 1:28 a.m., she's in the Canton High School bubble. At 1:30 a.m., she's home, and she says, that can't be right because it doesn't take me 2 minutes to get home. At 1:32 a.m., another 12-mile drive. And that's when she stopped driving around. And she says she doesn't recall if that's the time she stopped driving. On redirect, the prosecution asked her, did you alter any text messages? And she says no. Of course she's going to say that. And what about the comments in the photos or the dates on the photos? The prosecution didn't ask. Oversight? Then they got into harassment. She said the family has been dealing with harassment. Colin has been dealing with harassment. And remember, she's close to Colin, and the harassment is pretty bad. She said bloggers are harassing the family, that people are making phone calls to them, emails. People have showed up at the house. People have been emailing their school. And she broke down and cried. And this response from her was real. This wasn't put on in any way. What the crap is wrong with people? I don't care whether the Alberts are good or bad or lying or telling the truth. I don't care. In the sense that you don't harass people. If you believe that people should abide by the law, that people should try to be good people, decent people, then you don't go harassing people. And you especially don't go harassing people who are participants in a criminal case. There are pieces missing to what is or what was going on with Colin on that night. And I'm still not convinced that he had anything to do with anything. But here's the problem. People are obviously lying for him. And the fact that they're lying for him is going to make everybody suspicious. And it's going to make people look for things that may or may not be there. There is a reason why people were lying for him in the beginning. And it may or may not have anything to do with what happened at Fairview. Remember, he wasn't expected. Brian Jr. said, I don't even know how he knew I was home. So something was up earlier in the night. Something was going on with Colin earlier in the night that caused him to leave his friend's house. And instead of just going home, he went to the Alberts' house. That house for him is a safe place, a sanctuary, a place where he can go. And that night he decided to go there on an unplanned visit. And this is why I'm thinking that there's something else going on with him. Something that happened before the incident with John O'Keefe. And he went to Fairview thinking it was a safe haven, and he'd picked the wrong night. And then when people lie to cover for him for something, for some reason, everybody's suspicious and they assume that the reason everybody is lying has to do with what happened to John O'Keefe. And that may or may not be true. And of course, that's going to cause people who love him to double down. So I wouldn't be surprised if these photos and these screenshots had been altered in some way. Because now the family is dealing with harassment, and it's really horrible. I started to say it's not okay to harass people, but that's not strong enough. If you believe in obeying the law, don't break the law. The next witness was Colin Albert. He doesn't recall what time he went out, but he does say he went to his friend's Mike's house. He said that's 7 or 8 minutes away, and at this point he's not saying whether he's driving or not. He said there were other people there, and he doesn't remember what they did there, and this caught my attention. How do you not remember that? Were you just hanging out playing video games? Were you hanging out watching TV, listening to music? Come on, you remember the gist of it. What's up with that? He doesn't remember how he got there. What? Then when he's asked, he agrees he got a ride, but he doesn't remember who drove him there. He was drinking, but doesn't remember how much. This visit to Mike's house is important, not to the John O'Keefe case specifically, but because something happened before Colin went to the Alberts. Something happened there. So he went to Fairview. He said the reason he went to Fairview is because it was Brian Jr.'s birthday, but that's malarkey. And I'll tell you why it's malarkey. He wasn't invited. And that's very clear. Remember, Brian Jr. said, I don't even know how he knew I was home. He says Allie McCabe took him to 34 Fairview. Well, this is the first time we're hearing this. Allie McCabe did not say that in her testimony. There was no description of her taking him to Fairview. It was picking him up. Colin says he arrived at Fairview between 10:30 and 11 p.m. And some other witnesses say the same thing. He says he had a curfew and it was kind of loose, like around midnight. He said he went in through the side door. He stayed mostly in the living room and kitchen. He drank at the house, but he says he's not drunk. Of course, everybody drinks their faces off and nobody's overly intoxicated. He says he didn't go anywhere else in the house. He didn't see anyone else go into other areas. Well, you know what? If you're not in other areas, you wouldn't know. You might see them leave the room you're in, but you don't know where they went. When he's asked what time he left, he says confidently 12:10. This is off his baseline. Very beginning. Doesn't recall what time he went out. Doesn't recall what they were doing at his friend's house. Doesn't remember how he got there. Doesn't remember who drove him, if somebody drove him at all. Doesn't remember how much he's drinking. Doesn't remember much. But 12:10, he's certain. He said sometimes he and his cousins speak over Snapchat. There's a group Snapchat that includes the cousins. The prosecution on redirect was asking him about a Snapchat conversation about Brian Jr.'s birthday. And I expected, and I think the prosecution expected, for Colin to say, oh yeah. But Colin said, no, there was no Snapchat about Brian Jr.'s birthday. So that was a bit of a surprise. He said that when Allie came to pick him up, it only took him about 30 seconds to 1 minute to get out the door. He came out the side door. This is important. He said he saw Brian and Nicole on the way through the door. Here we have some coordinated stories that got a little bit mixed up. Don't bother coordinating your stories for court. Somebody always makes some little mistake. Just tell the truth. It's easier. Nicole's testimony was that she went through the front door and she was very specific about why. She wanted to end up in the foyer so she could take off her footwear. And in the foyer at the front door, she literally bumped into Colin as he was on his way out. So she physically made contact with him in the foyer at the front door as he was leaving. Colin is saying he saw Brian and Nicole on his way through the door, not when he got out the door or before he got out the door, on his way through the door. So it sounds to me like perhaps some witnesses got together and said, okay, I bumped into you as you were leaving, right? He said he told Nicole, my mom wants me home. What? Really? Julie Albert thought he was at his friend Mike's house. And how could she be saying she wants him home? I guess I'm assuming she's saying he wants him home, but he's saying my mom wants him home, not I'm past curfew. So it suggests that there was some communication. So where are these phone records? Why weren't all the phones looked at least by the police? He says he saw a blue Ford sedan outside, and I missed something about that. So I'm mentioning it here. If you know what I missed, you can let me know. He said he went right home, and it's a 5 to 10 minute drive. He saw no other cars outside. The McCabe vehicle was not outside. He's seeing no Jeep with a snowplow on it, no truck, no F-150, no SUV. He said his parents were home when he got home, and he went up to their bedroom and let them know he was home. Well, we know already through the cross-examination of Chris Albert that this is impossible. Chris Albert was still at the bar at 12:13. He'd walked home, gotten into bed, and was asleep before Colin got home. And again, because they're lying doesn't mean necessarily that he had anything to do with what happened to John O'Keefe. There could be another reason. We all have to be careful not to get tunnel vision. So he claims he got home at 12:20. When he lived on Meadows Avenue, he was a neighbor of John O'Keefe's. And he lived on Meadows Avenue most of his life. They had moved only months prior to the January 28th, 29th incident. He says he never had any animosity or argument with John O'Keefe. Well, his own father says different. And I want to hear this story about John O'Keefe bringing candy over to apologize for yelling at the kids. He says he didn't see John O'Keefe on January 28th at all. He said he knew Karen Read dated John. The prosecution was asking leading questions the whole time, or much of the time, by the way. He said in July 2023 was when he spoke with troopers. He says he gave troopers the screenshot of the text with Ali McCabe. I want to know when it was he decided to take a screenshot, why he decided to take a screenshot, and why it's a screenshot and not the police looking through his phone and finding that message way back then. Once again, the rule of best evidence is completely out the window. The troopers are given the screenshot. I want to know when he took that screenshot and why. They show the photos of him with Nicole. He says that was February 11th. On May 16th in court, the defense said they are renewing their objection to the testimony of harassment against the Albert family coming in. He wants it struck. They argue back and forth about that, and his request is denied. And I'm going to bring this up later because there's a detail that makes a point that isn't great for the prosecution, in my opinion. Colin Albert got back up on the stand. He was asked, did you prep for testimony with anyone? He said his lawyer. He was asked, anyone else? He said, no, no one. Your parents? Nope. And the nope was strong. And the strong nope, it seemed a bit too strong. The defense was having trouble believing that his family didn't say anything about their court dates or what happened or how their day in court was. And Colin says, nope. He said he did speak to Lally about a month ago. Well, he just said he didn't prep with anybody except his own lawyer. But okay, maybe it was a mistake. He agreed that he was given information as to what would be asked of him in court. And the defense asked, so what did he tell you? Oh, I don't remember everything he said. And every question that the defense asked, well, Colin couldn't remember. And the defense said, well, haven't you been thinking about this case? How long have you been thinking about this case? And Colin's answer was, since people started writing about me. And I think this was an attempt by the witness to say, hey, I've been harassed. But to me, this shows something else. It shows that his focus is on him and how things affect him. And the defense says, not since the event? No. So he doesn't think about this horrific event that occurred until it's affecting him personally. This shows a possible lack of empathy, and he doesn't remember anything from a month ago, by the way, but he does remember 12/10. So in this way, this harassment issue helps to make the point that what Colin cares about is Colin, because he's not thinking about this case, about this tragedy, since the tragedy happened only when it started to affect him. He was asked if Lally gave him instructions. He says no. He was asked, did you watch case coverage? No. News? No. Social media? No. Blogs? No. Well, how does he know then that people are writing about him? And don't tell me somebody else told him that people were writing about him and he didn't go look. He says he does not remember the last time he spoke with Allie. Well, he has already agreed that he and Allie were very close. They were close friends. They communicated all the time. And he doesn't remember the last time he spoke with her. And to clarify, the defense said, was it a week ago, a month ago, a year ago? He doesn't remember. He can't even pin it down to a time frame. Doesn't remember. Somebody told this witness that I don't remember is an out. I took training through the police department on surviving cross-examination. And one of the things that they teach you is if you don't remember, you say you don't remember. And if you do remember, well, then you do. They don't tell you to use I don't remember as an out, but they do make it clear, look, if you're being pressured and you don't remember, if that's the truth, then that's all you can do. And every police officer and lawyer knows that if a witness is on the stand saying, I don't remember, well, then getting the information out requires you go the long route, and sometimes you don't get it all out the way you want. Well, then the defense asks, were you told to say, I don't remember when you get stuck or nervous? And of course, he says no. So the defense says, so you really don't remember, correct? So this is true. You actually don't remember. And Colin says that's correct. Well, this was a trap, and Colin took the bait. Because if he doesn't remember things that happened a month ago, like a conversation with Lally that is really important, how is he going to remember things that occurred a couple of years ago and at the time they were occurring? He doesn't know they're important, doesn't know he needs to remember them. When a witness remembers things that don't matter, but they can't remember big things that do matter, it's always a red flag. He does remember that the witness prep meeting was at the DA's office. And after he testified yesterday, his parents didn't ask him, how did it go? According to this witness, this case never comes up in the Albert household. The defense puts up the text between Allie and him about the pickup time and asks, have you seen that before? He says yes. But he says that Lally didn't show it to him and that he doesn't remember if Lally talked to him about it. He was asked, who is Courtney Proctor? And he says, she's friendly with my aunt. He agrees he has been to the Proctor's home. He agrees that they're close, but he adds in himself that, well, that was more so when he was younger. The defense shows him a picture and the prosecution objects. The defense asks who's in that photo. The prosecution objects. There's a sidebar. Then he asks, when was the photo taken? Object. The witness says it was 10 years or less ago. Well, it turns out the photo is of Colin as a ring bearer in Courtney Proctor's wedding. And he says, when I was younger, and he was the one that added this. So this witness knows to qualify and minimize this. A witness this age knows to qualify and minimize just on his own. He said Michael Proctor was also there. Well, of course he was. It was his sister's wedding party. They were all part of the same wedding party. And the prosecution keeps objecting through the whole thing. This is wild. You would think that the prosecution would want to deal with this issue, heck, even before we got to trial. The defense asks the witness how long he's known Trooper Proctor. He says, well, since I was a little kid. And he says their families are close. He was never interviewed by Canton Police. He was only interviewed one time by state police. That was a year and a half after the incident, so July 18th, 2023, and the interview was by Michael Proctor. He says he doesn't recall how long that interview lasted. Well, the defense brings out his prior testimony at the other proceeding, and it turns out that interview only lasted 10 minutes. And even after being shown his previous testimony, he still says he doesn't remember how long it lasted until he can't keep pretending he doesn't remember and finally says, yeah, it was 10 minutes. The defense got out that the tone of that interview with Proctor was friendly. The interview was comfortable. Proctor didn't take his phone or seize anything from him. At the DA's office where the interview was conducted, the only people there were Proctor and his partner and this witness. On July 27th, Colin testified at a different proceeding and at that time had his own lawyer with him and they had to move on. The prosecution was objecting. In respect to the text with Allie, he agreed that he and Allie McCabe are close. Texting is common between them. They're friends. And that's generally how he communicates with Allie. After the witness agrees to all this, the defense puts up a photo and it shows the text about picking him up from Fairview. So there are about 8 texts just about getting picked up. Well, the next time they text at all is February 20th. The prosecution objects. Where are the texts? And on January 29th or 30th, when it comes out that John O'Keefe was found at the Albert residence, why are there not a flurry of texts? You would expect that, would you not? Oh my gosh, did you hear what happened? Right? The defense asks, well, were you aware of the tragedy that occurred? And the witness says, yeah. And you didn't text? And the answer is, I don't think that's correct. Maybe we used another app. And the defense asks, oh, why did you switch platforms? Remember, he'd earlier testified that normally they communicate via text. Sometimes they use Snapchat, but it's mostly text. And the defense posited, isn't it because Snapchat deletes the messages? The defense asks, are your settings in Snapchat set so that it does delete the messages? Colin doesn't remember. And the defense asks him straight out, you switched platforms or deleted texts? He says no. And the defense asks, where are those communications? Colin says, I don't know. You know, everybody would like to know. And notice, all of his texts are gone except for the one that helps him. This image of the text was a screenshot, not the actual text. So the actual text were not provided to any authority. It was just a screenshot. And turns out Proctor didn't even ask or look to see the actual text, just accepted the screenshot. And this is wild. The rule of best evidence is fundamental. This is something you learn early. Proctor never asked to do an extraction on the phone. Colin says he doesn't know what metadata is. And then the defense says, look, if you look at a screenshot, you can't see behind it the metadata, like the date and time. And Colin agrees and understands now. It comes out that Trooper Butnick asked for the screenshot, and Colin said he didn't have the screenshot anymore because he gave it to Brian Albert. Well, the witness doesn't remember this, but he does agree he never had to hand over his phone. He says he still has the same phone. Well, if that's the case, why provide a screenshot instead of the actual text? And the defense asks him that, and he says, I'm not sure. And you know, when he says I'm not sure, I believe him on that. I don't think it was his idea to only take a screenshot and hand over the screenshot. You see, somebody with experience who knows to present something that looks like good evidence but can't be verified is probably preferable if you're trying to hide something. I don't think Colin's smart enough to do this. And if he still has the same phone, how come the defense can't get a hold of it? And I don't know if he really has the same phone or not. The defense referenced the photos shown yesterday that show Colin with his arm around Nicole and show that he has no injuries. And the defense brings up a photograph from February 26, 2022 at Fenway Johnny's that was taken by somebody else. But here's the thing. If this photo shows any injuries on Colin, he can just claim that it happened after February 11th that he got the injuries. Well, they do show the photo, and it clearly shows bruised knuckles on his right hand. And the defense pointed out this photo is out of his control. He can't change any data on it. And the defense asked, how'd you get those injuries out? Oh my gosh, the story. He said, it was icy out. I had something in my left hand. And note, he's right-handed, so why is he carrying stuff in his left hand? Anyway, I had something in my left hand and I slipped and fell, and that's how I got the injuries on my knuckles. Well, you don't have to be an expert to recognize those injuries are not consistent with the description of what he's saying happened. People don't brace themselves for a fall by closing their fist and holding it out in that manner. Colin would have been better off to say, yeah, I was in a fight that week or something. Almost anything other than this silly story. Colin wanted the court to believe that he'd never been in a fight before, except maybe with his brothers when he was younger. He's never boxed. He's never practiced boxing. And then the defense gets out, well, yeah, he does hit the bag, but that's not practicing. And then he admits, well, maybe it is practicing boxing. The defense suggests the photos look like a re-injury to his knuckles from a prior injury. I can't speak to that. I'd need to look more closely. And even then, I don't know if I could, because I think you need a certain amount of medical expertise to be able to say that. The witness maintains that, it was only his right knuckles injured in the fall. The defense asked him, did you post a video where you threatened and the prosecution object? Then the defense asked, did you post a video where you threatened and the prosecution objected? The judge called for a sidebar and the jury was sent out. And I'm going to note too that through Colin's testimony, he's pretty cool, even when he's obviously lying. So I think this is not a new behavior for him. While the jury's out of the room, the court is shown two videos, one nicknamed or titled Advantage and the other one called Bang Bang. I'm just going to show you the two videos instead of describing them.
Yo, your man's boys, I will beat all your asses. I promise you, I will fuck you all up. Pull up, bitch.
And the next one, please.
Fuck you now. Fuck you. Yeah. Big cold, boy, you be knocked out. Hey,
Colin was asked about the Advantage video and how he said he would F them up and beat their A. And the defense said, was that a threat? Colin says, I don't call it a threat. And they go back and forth. And eventually he finally says, yeah, it was kind of a threat. Yeah, it was a threat against these Advantage boys. The second video, Bang Bang, the witness agrees, yeah, it was a threat. It was a second threat. And then he tries to say that in the second video, he's not sure when it was taken, but maybe it was the same night. And the defense says, well, you were wearing completely different clothing. And Colin says, well, maybe I changed my shirt. I do that. And the defense asks him, well, you do like to fight. Colin says, no. The defense brings out that at another hearing, July 27th, 2023, you had busted up knuckles at the hearing too. And it was so bad that it was noticed at the hearing that you had open injuries on your knuckles. And you said it was from hitting a heavy bag. But the injuries are only on his right hand. Lally tries to rehabilitate this and says, so you were 16 years old at the time of the videos? And this is the thing about Lally. He is leading the whole way. It blows my mind that he gets away with this. You're not supposed to lead your own witness. Anyway, comes out these Advantage boys are a hockey team. Lally gets him to say he had no relationship with them. Well, I don't think this is such a good idea to bring this out. There's no relationship? So what? He's threatening strangers? That's the implication. Is he just seeing some guys he doesn't like and threatening them? It comes out a little bit different later, but I don't think this is as rehabilitating as Lally might like. He says he received text messages from these guys and that they were name calling, but later it comes out that he doesn't really remember whether those name-calling text messages were received before or after he sent these guys these videos. And if he doesn't know them and they don't have any relationship, I don't know how they get each other's phone numbers. Lally says, was there ever a physical fight with these guys? No. You never met them then, face to face? That's correct. Did you ever threaten John O'Keefe? Never. The defense gets up and in respect to how old Colin was at the time that these videos were taken, there's a challenge. In the other hearing, Colin testified that the videos were taken in junior or senior year, not sophomore year. And that would have been 2021 to 2022, around the same time that John O'Keefe was killed. And the defense argued the videos should be admitted. He says it goes to the failure to investigate everybody properly. Plus, it goes to third-party culprit. The prosecution says there's no evidence of a fight or even that Colin and the victim were there at the same time. Yeah, because everybody's lying. And what Lally's saying is actually not correct. The EMTs noticed trauma on John, and they thought he looked like he'd been in a fight. And one of the first responders made a point of going to a police officer and saying, your guy has suffered trauma. And he wasn't saying your guy got hit by a car. Well, the videos were allowed into evidence after argument and review. So Colin gets up on the stand again, and he stands by his testimony that he has never been in a fight. So the defense plays the video for the jury. Even though out of the presence of the jury, Colin has already been shown his prior testimony and been impeached there, he keeps with the lie. He maintains, no, it was in my sophomore year. So the defense has to bring up the prior testimony again in front of the jury this time. The witness does agree that, yeah, it was a threat, but he's never been in a fight. The defense plays the second video, the bang bang video, and Colin agrees he hurled insults and that KO means knockout. He's not sure what bang bang means. He said it. He's not sure what it means though. And I think one of these things shows is a pattern of behavior, not just overall in terms of his sort of glorification of being a tough guy or fighting. And as to the second video, Colin agrees it was a threat, and it was a threat to ball up his fist and beat the heck out of them. And Colin says correct, but this comes after some push and pull with the defense. Colin says the injuries to his knuckles at the other hearing were as a result of hitting on a bag. He says he's right-handed. Do you hit the bag just with one hand? I mean, you hit the bag with both hands, so why aren't both hands injured? On redirect, I don't know that Lally got the answers that he was expecting or perhaps hoping for. Instead of explaining the whole thing, I'm going to play you the clip and that back and forth and let you decide for yourself what you think.
You and I and other individuals met prior to your testimony in this case. It was just one time, is that correct?
Correct.
Did we talk about something called sequestration?
Not that I remember, no.
Did we talk about having conversations with other witnesses while the case was pending or going on?
No.
Now, you testified when you were asked on cross-examination that you haven't had any conversations with any other witnesses, you haven't watched any coverage, you haven't done any interviews, correct?
Correct.
Was that at my instruction?
No.
Is that something that you've done at any point in time as far as talking to any other witnesses, including your parents?
No.
Lally asked how many times Colin had seen Trooper Proctor in his life. Colin says 5 to 6 times, and he says he was pretty young when he saw them. Toward the end of Colin being on the stand, he's really finally showing some nerves. His respiration is up. He's been under pressure for a while. He's even wiping his hands on his leg at one point. Colin claims to have no independent memory of the Proctor wedding, but that is when the prosecution asks him the question in that specific leading format, so that Colin could just say, that's right. Prosecution asks if he and Allie switch between calls, texts, and other platforms, and of course he says, yeah. Well, we would actually need to see the phone to see whether or not that's true, to see if there is some pattern established. But of course, nobody got his phone, so nobody can say. It's a big game of who do you believe? Lally brings out that the photo of his injured knuckles was taken after February 11th. I thought this was a good point by the prosecution because the obvious answer is, yeah, I got in a fight after that. The problem is he didn't say he got in a fight. He said he fell on the ice. And Lally says, and these are injuries you got from falling on the ice. And Colin says, yes. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think juries are that stupid. Lally gets the witness to reiterate that he was a sophomore when those videos were taken. Well, either he's lying under oath now or he lied under oath at the other hearing. The prosecution brings out that the Advantage boys were not people he knew. Really, why does he do this? Because I don't think this is such a great idea. What this is showing is that this kid is willing to threaten strangers if this is true. And this is where it comes out that Colin received texts that were sort of name calling. And I don't think Lally intended for it to come out that well, gee, maybe these texts of name calling, well, they could have come after he sent the threatening videos. Who knows? And where are all these texts then? Are we seeing those? Is Lally introducing those to try and rehabilitate the issue of Colin sending these videos? No. Now, why is that? Lally says, was there ever any threats or conflict between you and John O'Keefe? And of course, Colin says, never. You mean, what about the Nevercracker whole thing? And Lally again brings up whether Colin was thinking about the case and Colin said he hadn't, not until people started writing about him on the internet. It shows a callousness on Colin's part, and it comes out that people were writing about him on the internet, on Twitter and social media, and commenting about him. Well, he testified he never looked at social media. He was asked if he ever encountered John O'Keefe at the Fairview residence, and of course he said no. I'm going to save the testimony and cross-examination of Matt McCabe. That's all I've got for you for the moment. Trust your gut. See you in the comments.